Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. And I'm still here filming on my own. And I'm trying to get on. I'm trying to grow as much food as I can because it's not just great to have fresh food in the garden, food that is seasonal and tastes good, but also spiritually it's rewarding and really important. So hopefully more and more people will be growing something edible in their gardens. Now, in practical terms, the ground has been pretty wet this winter, but it is warming up, and particularly in these raised beds. And I'm ready to plant out some cos lettuce. This is Lobjoy's cos, which I love. It's a really big cos lettuce, and there's a real taste to it. Now, I've grown these in plugs, and the reason for doing that is to get individual plants that I can space out well. But if you haven't started yet, there's plenty of time to sow some lettuce, get hold of some seed, sprinkle them thinly in a row, and then you can thin them out. These really should be spaced at least 9 inches and even a foot apart so they can develop into nice, strong plants. This spacing in raised beds means that you actually don't waste any space, and you're going to get plenty of lettuce. And these will be ready to harvest in about 6 weeks' time, which is really something to look forward to. On today's programme, Rachel nurtures her love of herbs, and in particular those favourites that she always turns to first. We visit the garden of Juan Carlos, who has created an extraordinary urban retreat in the smallest of spaces. And I'll be moving plants, sowing more, and doing some pruning here at Longmeadow. Last year, this container had carrots in it, and I've kept the old compost, and I'm going to sow directly into it some parsley, which is also a member of the carrot family. Now, normally, it's not a good idea to reuse old compost, and I would say you should always refresh it, but these are not normal times. So if you can't get compost, and some people have been having some problems with that, reuse old compost, use soil, use whatever you can get, because in the end, it's better to use something than nothing. And remember, if you're planting in any kind of container, make sure that there are holes in the bottom for drainage. And normally, I don't actually direct sow parsley into the ground. I've got a tray of seedlings here. These are flat leaf parsley, hundreds of plants. So these will all be pricked out into individual pots, grown on, and then planted out in about 4 weeks' time. However, you can grow parsley perfectly well just by sprinkling some seeds into old compost, into any old container. And I want to grow more parsley because parsley is a fantastic herb. It's good for you. It tastes marvellous, but you do need to keep sowing new parsley to get a good, decent supply. So just a few seeds like that. And that's all you need. Sprinkle them lightly over the compost. There we go. Lightly work your hands over it to cover them up, and then water it, and that's all you have to do until the seedlings start to appear. Don't let those seeds dry out, and they should germinate in about 10 days' time. But the easiest herb of all, even if you've never gardened, even if you don't have a garden, is mint. Mint famously is invasive, and you put it in a border and it takes over. But if you've got a windowsill, you can grow yourself a really good supply of mint, much better than anything you can buy. Get hold of a plant. I mean, ideally, if someone can give you one, or if you go and buy a plant from a supermarket, and then cut a couple of stems and put those into water. And I've got some here. You just pop them into water, and what you'll see is after a few days they will start to grow roots. Now these roots are very, very small at the moment, but they are there. And once there's a good flush of roots, you then pot them up into a little bit of compost, and that will become a healthy mint plant that will give you unlimited mint. Really good tea, good with all kinds of dishes, all summer long. Well, someone who very much is trying to use her garden as much as possible is Rachel. And this year she's decided to grow many more herbs, and in particular, one of her Mediterranean favourites.
I love thyme. It's easy to grow, it's great for cooking and for wildlife, and some varieties have beautiful, dainty flowers.
I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Thank goodness for gardening, because when you're going through challenging times of whatever type, it just keeps you in the moment and you're doing something productive that you love. And I really do thank my lucky stars every day. I have to say that I'm reverting back to my comfort thing, which is planting things in containers. And I really want to grow herbs this year on a major scale if I can. And I want to sort of look at individual herbs and see how I can get the best from them. And I'm starting with my desert island herb, which is thyme. I just couldn't be without it. I've already partially filled the container with a soil-based compost, and then I've added in a little bit of a peat-free multi-purpose and a good few handfuls of this, which is horticultural grit, you can see. And that's just going to really open it up and give us some great drainage in there, because they like it hot, they like it sunny, and they like lots of drainage in the soil as well. Now I'm going to start with one I haven't actually grown before. This is an orange scented thyme, lovely green colouring, and oh, it has a really sort of sweet citrusy aroma, so it's beautiful. Love thymes. Just put that here, I think, towards the front. So just making sure the levels are right so that it's going to end up just below the surface and allow enough room for a bit of top dressing.
You don't need much space to grow thyme, or any herbs for that matter. If you haven't got outside space, just pop one in a pot, a window box, or on an inside windowsill.
Then I'm going to add this one. Now, this is an old favourite of mine, actually. It's called Doon Valley. And a friend of mine described it as being just like scrambled egg, and I think that's spot on. It's one I've been growing for many years, and I do rather like that. It's got lovely pink flowers. And I think I'm going to put this one in here, because then you get this lovely tapestry effect. Next, I'm going to use this one. This is Foxley. Again, it's new to me, this one. Very pretty. So that one I'm going to put here because it's got a more prostrate sort of hanging habit. You can see these stems, they just want to just dangle over the side there. And can I squeeze one more in? I mean, I usually try to. I'm going to put this little one, which is aureus. So you've got this bright, acidy green colouring, which is really pretty. Right, I think that's pretty much perfect. So now it's just filling in around each root ball. I'm just going to top dress this pot actually with a layer of horticultural grit. And what they absolutely dislike, and possibly won't even survive, is a cold, wet winter. It's the wet, really. That can literally just cause the plant to rot off. Gorgeous. Right, so that's done.
I'm filling this big old tub with Thymus vulgaris, our most popular thyme, and the one most often used in cooking. So I'm growing lots of it. As with any container for herbs, always make sure there are drainage holes in the bottom, especially important with thyme.
I've been rummaging around, seeing what I can find. And I thought, well, you know, mop bucket. I mean, these galvanised things are actually rather attractive. And this has got this lovely bit of sort of, these lovely holes in here already. Great drainage, so I can put one plant in there and another in this. drainage holes, of course, in the bottom again. Right, so in goes the compost. And I've got everything now from my bog standard Common Times. I've got things here that you can find by mail order. But sometimes I think it's just worth going the extra mile and finding a specialist nursery who's got something a bit more unusual. This one I really like the look of. It's called Peter Davis, and it's just got that kind of really different habit. It's very upright. It's a slightly punky thyme, if I dare say. It's got that sort of haircut. Right, there we go.
Most thymes are evergreen, so the leaves can be used all year round, fresh or dried. The best time to pick the leaves is early summer, when the plant is at its most productive, before flowering. And once the plant's flowered, trim it back to encourage fresh, new leaves.
Right. Now in this funny little bit here, I'm going to try Jecker's Red Eye Thyme. Now this is one of a series of new thymes which have been bred to make sure that there's a sort of really long flowering period here in the UK. But the real thing about it that makes it special is the colour of the flowers, which is a very, very reddish pink, really quite a dramatic dark colour. I think it'll be happy, and there, you see that will just dangle there over the edges. I have to say, it really is worth the effort to contact these nurseries, and many of them under current circumstances where you can't go and visit, but what you can do is contact them via mail order. You can give them a ring, give your order and pay for it without having to actually go and pot around the nursery. You can still get all the pleasure, something beautiful to look at, something for the bees, something to eat. There's still a lot to celebrate.
Well, certainly at this time of year, it's not hard to find things to celebrate and enjoy. And one of the things that's given me huge pleasure this spring are these tulips. This is Tulipa acuminata, and they're fantastic. I love the way they are licks of colour coming through the grasses. And I chose them for the Paradise Garden, which of course is based on the Gardens of Islam, because these are like the original tulips that came to Europe from Turkey and had these wonderful pointed flames of flower. Now, whether the grasses underneath them are elegant, I'm not sure. They haven't really had a good winter because they hate sitting in cold, wet ground, and it was the wettest winter in living memory. I also overplanted. There are too many, so I need to lift some. I've already started to dig some up. I'm going to replant them elsewhere, and I'm cutting them back. By the way, I planted these as Stipa, and they've gone and changed their name to Nicella tenuissima. But they'll always be Stipa to me. There's no doubt about it that the Paradise Garden doesn't really fit in with the rest of the garden here at Longmeadow. It's derived from a culture and a climate that is very different to the local one here, and I think that's great. I find it inspiring and fun to do. And you don't need a big space to take a theme and really develop it well. We went to North London to visit the Islington home of Juan Carlos, where he has made something truly extraordinary in a tiny space.
I live and work in London. After a busy day at work, I can't wait to come in the garden. It very much feels like my haven, my sanctuary. I love it. I moved into the flat back in 2010. When I came in, the first thing I saw was an empty space, boring space, I must say. So I built a raised bed, first in wood, now it's in steel. Then came the big architectural feature. So the first thing was the tree ferns. the Fatsia japonica on one corner and the Japanese maple. So that was basically the frame of the garden. And over time, it just grew organically. The garden is quite small. It's 5.5 meters by 6 in depth, barely 6. Really, what I try to do is make it as big as I could with what I had to work with. So almost you create the illusion that the garden keeps on going, but in reality, it just ends 6 meters away. So what I've done here really is layer these plants in a way that actually gives the viewer the impression that there's a lot more space than there really is. There's the clematis here, and behind there's the small-leaved ivy. So when you're viewing from inside, you think that they're much farther away than they really are. In addition, what I've tried to do is make the end of the garden a bit darker as well. And that darkness in the back actually doesn't reveal what's behind, so that's how that sense of depth is created when viewed from inside the flat. In addition to the more temperate plants, I have a few tropicals, which I really like. I guess the stars are the colocaceas. They're big heart-shaped leaves and reminds me of my Colombian roots. So I think the colocaceas do bring a very tropical feel to the garden because they actually thrive in very hot, sunny, damp conditions. This one is Black Magic, and it's quite velvety and soft. It doesn't survive an English winter, so I have to bring it inside every November, stays there probably until May, and then I bring it outside. I have it inside a pot, which I've actually carved out the bottom. So literally what I do is I cut down the roots, just remove it from the soil, put it on a saucer full of pebbles. Then I prune back all the leaves, but leave the stem itself, because it's out of the stem that the new growth will come back the next spring. Obviously, the garden is very much part of the flat, so I wanted to create a sense of continuity between the in and the outdoors. So in this space here, I've planted sempervivums, or house leeks. It's a space that basically was full of gravel and utilized and managed to actually make a little garden out of it. They've done really well, they've thrived. I literally cover the entire gravel space, and in the spring and early summer, they all flower. It does create that sense of continuity when you're inside. You really don't know where the limit, where the border is. What I've tried to do is obviously use every inch. I bought this pot of baby tears, or mind your own business, as it's known as well. And then I cut it in pieces, and then I plugged it into the gap between the paved area. It has literally spread from the back all the way here, and what's nice about it, it brings this wetland, watery feel, which is great. It is a great refuge for worms, so it goes quite thick in the summer. I would warn people to use it in places where it doesn't invade, so avoid it in lawns. However, in patios like this one is great because it holds all the different pots together. So it's a nice coverage for the plants, for the wildlife. The garden not only brings me joy and brings nature to home, but also it feels very, very Colombian, very tropical. And that's what I try to achieve, and I think I've done it.
I do think that is a beautiful garden. And when you think that the whole of his garden is not much bigger than this one bed, it shows you that no garden is ever too small to be special. And Juan Carlos's garden is part of the National Garden Scheme. Now, of course, none of these gardens are open at the moment, so we can't visit in real life. But if you go to the NGS website, they do have virtual tours of some of their gardens. It's not as good as the real thing, but it does make a very good alternative. Now, this particular part of Longmeadow, the dry garden, is very different from the rest because about 6 to 9 inches down is just a sheet of sandstone. And it's extraordinary what will grow here. Anything that likes good drainage and hot sunshine is really happy. So we've got the honesty growing, we've got the cardoons, the euphorbias. So the steepers should be happy in here. You can see that what we've got here is Steepa gigantea, and that has great oat flower heads, which are fantastically dramatic. It's related to the Steepa tenuissima, and like them, is much happier in dry, well-drained conditions. So I'm going to add these two into here. There you are. That's the bedrock underneath. And if I just give the plant, before I plant it, a little bit of TLC. And the way to do it is just comb your fingers through it and take out all the dead material. A little bit of hairdressing. And then pop it in the ground, like that. And that will be fine. And the whole point of growing a Steepa in these conditions is that it won't get too lush. And what happens to Steepa tenuissima in particular is on rich soil, it grows too lush and then just flops over sideways. And you lose that lovely fountain appearance, which is the reason why you grow it. So hopefully this will like its new home. This is Lanarth White. It's a lovely hydrangea with a slightly ivory tinge to its white, which grows really well in light shade. It's a woodland plant. But lots and lots of people say, well, when do I prune it? Do I cut these spent flower heads off? How hard do I prune it back? And in fact, it's easy. Sometime in April, probably needs to be done by now if you haven't. When you start to see good new growth from the leaves, trim it back by about 1/3 to 1/4, taking off all the old spent heads. So just cut these long growths back to a bud, and that will promote new growth that will carry the flowers. And then you don't need to cut it or prune it or do anything to it other than make sure it doesn't get too dry until next spring. That's good. This is a job actually I've been meaning to do for weeks. But here are some jobs for you this weekend. If, like me, you sow beetroot into plugs or blocks, now is the time to plant them out. I planted mine in groups, so I'm leaving plenty of space for the roots to expand and they can be dug up as a batch. If you haven't sown any already, it's not too late to sow the seed direct into the ground, leaving 1 inch or 2 between each seed and room between the rows to weed. Daffodils start to form the bulb for next year's flowers as soon as this year's flowers fade. In order that all the energy of the plant can go into creating next year's display, snap off the seed heads, but leave the stem and the leaves to die back naturally. Summer bulbs make great late-season cut flowers, and now is the perfect time to plant gladioli. Because the stems are tall and they can be top-heavy, make sure they're planted good and deep. And if your ground is at all heavy, add some extra drainage like grit. You can plant them quite close together in rows, about 4 to 6 inches apart, then cover them over well, and they should start to appear in about a month's time. It's so nice to have a bit of sunshine that the dogs and I can lie in. And by the way, you may be wondering who this little person is. This is Patty, the smallest dog we've ever owned, but by far the bossiest. And we've had her for about 6 months now. She's not yet a year old. And she loves the garden. Wherever I go, Patty follows, and she's part of the gang. So you're going to be seeing a lot more of her. And we want to see more of your gardens too. Thank you so much for the hundreds of you that have sent in fascinating, funny, inspiring films to share with us all. And we'll be showing you as many as we can in the weeks to come. This week, we meet Elliot and Alice in East Sussex. But first, in Leeds, Mothin and his daughter, Khadija.
So we're inside the house, and this is where most of my delicate plants are. Some of them are getting quite big for the pots that they're in, so we're going to transfer these and we'll pot them into larger pots. This is a jackfruit. If you don't know what a jackfruit is, you're missing out, because they're the largest fruit in the world. They're the Bangladeshi national fruit, and they're my absolute favourite. So we'll take these downstairs and we'll pot these up. So if you can carry that one for me. So we'll fill these up.
Don't you need the wood chips?
Yeah, you're right. The reason that we add these wood chips into the bottom like this is it'll provide drainage, but as well as that, wood holds on to moisture. It's one of those things that we try and do here, is try and grow as many vegetables and crops that have a connection to Bangladesh. Well done.
Muddy hands.
You did a really good job there. Well done.
Today we're going to look at the plants that we've been growing and the raised beds that we've made over the last week.
What have we got then?
Leeks, tomatoes and chilies, peas and beans and munch too over there. So the raised beds, we've completed 4 of the 5 that we're going to make, and we're going to make a fence because of the dog.
Show them what Buster is like when we try and do stuff on the raised beds.
I think Buster the Basset Hound has stolen the show, but then dogs and gardening are always a good combination. If you have anything about your garden you'd like to share, don't be shy. Please film it in landscape, not portrait, and send it in to us. And you can get all the details on how to do that from our website. And I and Nigel and Nellie and Patty will see you back here next Friday at the slightly later time of 9 o'clock for a full 1-hour programme. And we've got a revolutionary new method of filming Gardener's World, all as part of our pledge to bring the programme to you no matter what. It's going to be interesting. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.